Store owners laughed at the seamstress for buying torn clothes, but the reason made everyone cry. Susan Johnson felt the heat of their laughter burning her back as she tightly held the hole-ridden sweater. The store clerks pointed and whispered among themselves, not even trying to hide their disdain for the customer who insisted on buying only the most damaged items in the shop. "Look, she's back!" shouted Karen, the store manager, to her employees. "The crazy lady who loves torn clothes wants to take our trash again." Susan kept her eyes fixed on the garments she was carefully examining. Every hole, every tear was inspected with the precision of someone who knew what she was doing. Her work-worn hands glided over the damaged fabrics as she made her meticulous selections. "How much for all of this?" she asked calmly, placing a pile of clothes on the counter that anyone else would have thrown in the trash. The laughter grew even louder. Jennifer, one of the younger clerks, covered her mouth to hide her mocking smile. "Ma'am, are you sure these clothes are all ruined?" she said, feigning concern. "Even our cleaning staff doesn't want this stuff." "Please wrap them up," Susan replied, her tone unchanged. Karen shook her head, amused by the situation. For 3 months, this woman had come in every week, always looking for the same things: torn, stained, defective clothes that were impossible to sell. At first, she'd even tried to convince Susan to take better items, but now it had become a running joke in the store. "That'll be $120, Karen announced, charging the full price, even though those items were headed for the dumpster. Susan opened her plain wallet and carefully counted out the bills. The money was there, exact, as if she knew precisely how much she'd spend. "Do you work in sewing?" Jennifer asked, genuinely curious. "I do," Susan answered, lifting the heavy bags. "Must be for making floor rags," another clerk remarked, sparking another round of laughter. Susan simply thanked them politely and left the store with her purchases. The doorbell chimed, marking yet another of her mysterious visits. Outside, she walked through the bustling streets of downtown New York City with the air of someone in a hurry. Her steps were steady despite the weight of the bags, and her eyes held a determination that contrasted with the simplicity of her clothes. Every few blocks, people recognized her. She was the torn clothes lady, as she'd become known among the local shopkeepers. Her reputation had spread from store to store, creating a morbid curiosity about her strange shopping habits. At the men's clothing store on the next street, the same ritual repeated. Susan carefully inspected the damaged stock, completely ignoring the clerk's snide remarks. "She probably sells this stuff in the outskirts," the store owner muttered to his employee. "Some people have no shame making a profit off others' misfortune." But Susan wasn't selling anything. In fact, she spent nearly her entire pension on these weekly purchases. What little remained barely covered her basic bills and essentials. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. At home, in the small apartment she shared with her elderly neighbor, Susan faced more criticism. 72-year-old Margaret couldn't understand why her housemate wasted money like this. "Susan, for heaven's sake," Margaret exclaimed, seeing the bags full of ruined clothes. "You're being cheated by those shameless shopkeepers. They're charging new clothes prices for this junk." "I know what I'm doing, Margaret," Susan replied calmly, carrying the bags to her room. "You don't know a thing. They should be paying you to take this trash, not the other way around." Margaret was trying to be a good friend. Ever since Susan had lost her job at the garment factory 2 years ago, she'd been worried about her friend's mental state. First came the isolation, then this strange obsession with damaged clothes. In Susan's room, 2 old sewing machines dominated the space. A brother from the 80s that still worked perfectly, and a simpler serger she'd bought second-hand. The walls were covered with makeshift shelves piled with colorful threads, buttons, ribbons, and other sewing supplies. Every night, Margaret heard the sound of the machines running late into the night. It was a constant, repetitive noise that lasted for hours. Several times, she tried peeking through the keyhole to see what Susan was doing in there, but she never got a good look. "At least let me see what you're working on," Margaret asked one of those nights. "It's nothing special," Susan answered through the door. "Just fixing a few things," but Margaret knew it was more than that. During the day, she noticed Susan left with different bags than the ones she came home with. They were neatly wrapped packages, colorful, nothing like the rags she bought. Margaret's curiosity turned to worry when she began noticing Susan was losing weight. She ate less and less, claiming she wasn't hungry, yet spent considerable amounts every week on those inexplicable purchases. "Susan, are you sick?" Margaret asked one day, noticing her friend's dark circles. "I'm fine, just a little tired." "Tired from what? You don't have a job." The remark hit Susan like a slap. She stopped stirring the pot of soup she was heating and fell silent for a few seconds. "I do work, Margaret. It's just not the kind of work you understand." "Then explain it to me, help me understand." But Susan just finished preparing her simple meal and retreated to her room once again. At the store Susan frequented most, tensions were rising. Karen, the manager, had noticed sales of damaged items had skyrocketed, and she couldn't understand how that woman could afford such high prices for worthless things. "Do you think she's reselling this stuff?" Karen asked her employees during a meeting. "Must be," Jennifer replied. "But to who? Who'd buy this junk?" "Maybe she's got some shady scheme going," suggested Amanda, the most experienced saleswoman. "These humble folks always find a way to make dirty money." Suspicion grew when Susan showed up with a specific list of sizes. She was looking for damaged children's clothes, which left everyone even more puzzled. "Now she wants torn kids' clothes," Karen remarked to her co-workers. "That's really weird." Jennifer, a mother of 2 young children, felt a chill in her stomach. What kind of person specifically sought out ruined children's clothes? "We should tell someone," she whispered to Amanda. "Tell who?" "She's not doing anything wrong, at least not here." But the sense that something sinister lay behind those purchases began to poison the store's atmosphere. The employees started watching Susan more closely, searching for clues about her true intentions. It was Amanda who decided to follow her. On a rainy Thursday, she waited for Susan to leave the store and discreetly trailed her through downtown streets. She wanted to find out where that woman took all those clothes. Susan walked for about 20 minutes until she reached an old building in Chinatown. It was a 3-story building with a worn-out facade and some windows boarded up with planks. It didn't seem like a place where anyone would live. Amanda hid behind a parked car and watched Susan climb the outdoor stairs to the 2nd floor. She knocked on a door and was greeted by an older woman who welcomed her with a warm smile. "Mrs. Johnson, so glad you're here," the woman said, helping her with the bags. Amanda tried to move closer to hear better, but the voices were muffled by the rain. After a few minutes, Susan went inside and the door closed. For nearly 2 hours, Amanda waited in the rain, determined to find out what was happening inside. When Susan finally came out, she no longer carried the heavy bags. Instead, she held a small, colorful package. The next day, Amanda told everything to her co-workers at the store. "I knew something was off," Karen exclaimed. "No one spends that much money on junk without some ulterior motive." "Do you think she's selling drugs?" Jennifer asked, lowering her voice. "Could be anything," Amanda replied, "but it's definitely a scheme." Paranoia settled firmly in the store. The employees began treating Susan with even more disdain, convinced she was involved in shady activities. When Susan showed up the following week, the atmosphere was tense. Karen served her curtly, almost tossing the damaged clothes onto the counter. "Are you sure you want all this?" she asked in an accusatory tone. "Yes," Susan replied, puzzled by the change in behavior. "And what do you need all this for, if you don't mind me asking?" Susan stared at Karen as if deciding whether to answer. "To do what needs to be done," she finally said. "What kind of thing needs to be done with torn clothes?" "The kind you'd never understand." The answer infuriated Karen. She was tired of this mysterious woman who showed up every week with her superior attitude, as if she knew something the others didn't. "Listen here," Karen said, raising her voice. "I don't know what kind of business you're running, but if it's something shady, you'd better find another place to shop." "Shady business?" Susan seemed genuinely surprised. "Don't play innocent. No one spends a fortune on ruined clothes without some hidden agenda." Other customers in the store began paying attention to the argument. Susan noticed she was becoming the center of attention and grew visibly uncomfortable. "I just want to buy the clothes," she said calmly. "If you don't want to sell, I'll go somewhere else." "No, no." Karen quickly changed her tone, realizing she might lose a regular customer. "Take them, of course. Sorry, we're just curious, you know." Susan paid in silence and left the store carrying her bags. But this time, she noticed she was being watched more closely than usual. Some people whispered as she passed, as if they knew something about her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The feeling of being watched followed Susan all the way home. She had noticed a blonde woman discreetly trailing her for the last 3 blocks, always keeping a safe distance. It was Jennifer, who had decided to investigate on her own. After the suspicions raised by Amanda, she couldn't sleep peacefully, thinking about the children who might be involved in whatever Susan was doing. When Susan entered her building, Jennifer wrote down the address and watched from across the street. She wanted to better understand that woman's routine before making any drastic decisions. After 2 hours of waiting, Jennifer saw Susan leave again, this time carrying a large, neatly wrapped package. It was colorful with pretty bows, completely different from the torn clothing bags she usually carried. Curiosity overcame fear. Jennifer decided to follow Susan once more, this time determined to discover the final destination of those mysterious transformations. The journey was long. Susan took 2 buses and walked through neighborhoods Jennifer barely knew. It was a more outlying area of the city, with simple houses and poorly paved streets. Finally, Susan stopped in front of a faded green gate. She rang the bell and was greeted by a middle-aged black woman who welcomed her with a huge smile. "Mrs. Johnson," the woman exclaimed, "the kids are waiting." Jennifer felt her heart race. Kids? What kids were these? She hid behind a tree and watched Susan hand the package to the woman. Then several children came running toward the gate, all talking at once. "Aunt Susan! Aunt Susan! What did you bring today?" "Is it for me?" Susan smiled in a way Jennifer had never seen in the store. It was a genuine smile, full of warmth, completely different from the serious expression she always wore during her shopping trips. "Easy, easy," Susan said, patting one of the children's heads. "There's enough for everyone." The woman who had answered the gate began unwrapping the package in front of the children. When the paper was removed, Jennifer couldn't believe her eyes. They were beautiful clothes, colorful, well-made, with perfect finishes. Dresses, pants, blouses, all looking brand new and of excellent quality. None of it resembled the torn rags Susan bought at the store. "Wow!" the children shouted in unison, each grabbing a different piece. "Aunt Susan, this blouse is gorgeous," said a girl around 8 years old, holding up a blue dress with hand-embroidered details. "And these pants look like they're from the mall," added a boy, examining a pair of jeans that were flawless. Jennifer realized she was witnessing something entirely different from what she had imagined. These weren't suspicious activities. It was the exact opposite. She kept watching and saw Susan distribute the clothes among the children, explaining how each piece should be cared for. The woman who had answered the gate introduced herself as the director of the place, and Jennifer finally understood where she was. It was a shelter, a home for children who had no family or whose families couldn't care for them properly. "Mrs. Johnson," the director said, "I don't know how to thank you. The kids really needed new clothes, and with the tight budget—" "No need to thank me, Deborah," Susan replied. "It's the least I can do. But you spend so much money on fabric and materials. It's not fair. What's fair is seeing these children well-dressed and happy." Jennifer felt her eyes well up. She had gotten it all wrong, completely wrong. Susan wasn't involved in any suspicious scheme. She was turning torn clothes into new pieces to donate to children in need. All that mystery, all that dedication, was for a noble and generous reason. Guilt washed over Jennifer. She had judged Susan in the worst possible way, concocting conspiracy theories about a woman who dedicated her life to helping those in need. When Susan said goodbye to the children and left the shelter, Jennifer followed her again. But this time, it wasn't out of suspicion. It was out of shame. She needed to talk to that woman, to apologize for what she had thought. "Excuse me," Jennifer called out as Susan reached the bus stop. Susan turned around, surprised to recognize one of the store clerks. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone defensive. I wanted to apologize," Jennifer stammered. I saw what you did there at the shelter." Susan's face hardened instantly. "You followed me? We thought you were doing something wrong with the clothes. And now you know I wasn't. Why didn't you ever tell us? Why let us think the worst?" Susan took a deep breath before answering. "Because you didn't deserve to know the truth," she said, with a sadness that pierced Jennifer's heart. "You treated me like trash, laughed at me, humiliated me every week. Why should I share something so important in my life with people who only knew how to judge and look down on me?" Jennifer couldn't respond. Every word Susan spoke was true and cut deep. "I've been doing this for 2 years," Susan continued. "Every week I take clothes you were going to throw away and turn them into something decent for children who've never had anything new in their lives. And every week you treated me like some circus animal. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to. It's easier to laugh and judge than to try to understand." The bus arrived, and Susan boarded without looking back. Jennifer stood frozen at the stop, a heavy weight in her chest and one certainty: she had to tell the truth to her co-workers. The next day, Jennifer's confession caused a stir in the store. Karen initially didn't believe the story, thinking it was some misunderstanding. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "If she was doing charity work, why hide it from us?" "Because we treated her badly," Jennifer replied. "Because we laughed at her every week. We laughed because she was buying trash. It was weird. It wasn't trash to her. It was material to make something beautiful." The revelation affected all the employees differently. Amanda, who had followed Susan first, felt ashamed for spinning conspiracy theories. Jennifer felt guilty for doubting the motives of someone genuinely good. Karen, however, was more concerned about the practical implications. If the story got out, it could hurt the store's reputation. "You can't talk about this to anyone," she told the staff. "If customers find out we mistreated someone who does charity work, we have to apologize to her," Jennifer interrupted. "Apologizing could make things worse. Let's pretend nothing happened and treat her better from now on." But Jennifer couldn't accept that. Guilt was eating her up inside, and she knew she had to make things right. When Susan returned to the store the following week, the atmosphere was completely different. The clerks greeted her politely, and no one commented on her purchases. Susan noticed the change but said nothing. She simply picked out her usual damaged clothes and headed to the register. "Mrs. Johnson," Jennifer said hesitantly, have you always done this sewing work?" Susan eyed her suspiciously. "Why?" "Just curious. You're very skilled." "I've been doing it for many years." Karen watched the conversation from a distance, worried about where it might lead. She didn't want Jennifer to reveal they knew about the shelter. "Where did you learn?" Jennifer pressed. "Taught myself. Necessity teaches. It must take a lot of work to fix these clothes." Susan stopped fumbling with her wallet and looked straight at Jennifer. "You know something you shouldn't," she said calmly. Jennifer swallowed hard. She'd been caught. I saw you at the shelter," she confessed in a low voice. "Did you follow me again? I'm sorry, I just wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you buy these clothes. And now I know. And I want to apologize for thinking poorly of you." Susan Johnson fell silent for a few seconds, weighing Jennifer's sincerity. "Do your co-workers know too?" Jennifer glanced at Karen and Amanda, who were watching the conversation nervously. "They do," she admitted. "And what are you going to do with that information?" "Nothing," Jennifer replied quickly. We wanted to help somehow." "Help how?" "I don't know. Maybe by giving discounts on the clothes or setting aside damaged pieces." Susan shook her head. "I don't need discounts. And I don't want pity favors. It's not pity. It's admiration." The word caught Susan off guard. It had been a long time since someone admired something she did. "Admiration? What you do is amazing. Taking clothes that were going to waste and turning them into beautiful things for children in need. That's beautiful." Susan felt her eyes well up, but held herself together. "Those children deserve nice things," she said. "Everyone does. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. Jennifer could no longer hold back and began crying right there in the middle of the store. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "We treated you so poorly, and you were doing something so beautiful." Jennifer's crying drew the attention of other customers. Karen grew nervous but didn't know how to intervene without making things worse. Surprisingly, Susan placed a hand on Jennifer's shoulder. "Don't cry," she said softly. "You didn't know. But we could have asked, we could have been kinder. You could have, but now you know, and that's what matters." Karen stepped forward, finally deciding to join the conversation. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, more respectfully than ever before, "we'd like to do something to make up for the misunderstanding." "What kind of thing?" "I don't know. You tell us." Susan thought for a moment before answering. "If you really want to help, you could set aside damaged clothes instead of throwing them out. That way, I don't have to dig through so much." "Of course," Karen replied immediately. "We can do that. And you can stop charging new clothes prices for pieces that were going to be discarded." Karen hesitated. "That would mean cutting into the store's profits." We can discuss better prices," she said diplomatically. Susan noticed the hesitation and smiled wryly. "Not much has changed, huh?" she said. "You still think you're doing me a favor?" "That's not it." "Yes, it is. You found out I do charity work, and now you want to feel good by doing something symbolic. But when it comes to sacrificing profit for my work, that's different." Karen flushed with shame. Susan had hit the nail on the head. "You're right," she admitted. "We're still putting our interests first. At least you're honest. What can we do to change that?" Susan looked at the three employees, now watching her expectantly. "You can start by treating me like a normal customer. No pity, no exaggerated admiration, no trying to make up for the past. Just basic respect." "What about the prices?" "Charge what's fair. If the clothes are damaged and were headed for the trash, they can't cost the same as clothes in good condition." Karen nodded silently. It was a fair request, even if it meant less profit. "What about helping the shelter?" Jennifer asked. "Can't we do anything?" "You can, but not because you know about my work. Do it because it's the right thing to do." Susan finished paying for her purchases and headed toward the store's door. Before leaving, she turned around one last time. "If any of you tell anyone about the shelter, I'll stop coming here," she said firmly. "Those children aren't a spectacle for anyone." After Susan left, the three employees stood in silence for a few minutes. "We messed with the wrong person," Amanda finally said. "She's stronger than she looks," Jennifer added. "And smarter than we thought," Karen chimed in. In the following days, a subtle change began to take place in the store. The employees discreetly started setting aside damaged clothing, creating a small, unofficial section to make Susan's shopping easier. Jennifer, in particular, couldn't stop thinking about the shelter and the children she had seen. During her lunch break, she decided to go back to the place to learn more about the work being done there. The director, Deborah, greeted her with some suspicion when Jennifer introduced herself as someone who knew Susan. "Mrs. Johnson never mentioned you," Deborah said. "Actually, we met through the store where she buys clothes. I wanted to learn more about your work." "Oh, you work at that downtown store? Mrs. Johnson always talks about it." Jennifer felt a tightness in her chest, wondering what kind of comments Susan had made about them. What does she say? That the people there don't understand the value of what they're doing, that you all think she's a little crazy for buying damaged clothes. We really didn't understand," Jennifer admitted, "but now we do." Deborah invited her to tour the shelter. It was a simple but well-kept place where 23 children of various ages lived while waiting for adoption or reunification with their biological families. "Mrs. Johnson is an angel in these children's lives," Deborah explained as they walked through the halls. Before she came along, the children had to wear donated clothes that weren't always in good condition. Often they were old, faded clothes that just covered their bodies. And now each child has at least 3 nice outfits, clothes they can wear to school without shame, for outings on Sundays to feel good about themselves. Jennifer was introduced to some of the children, who spoke of Susan with genuine affection. "Aunt Susan is really nice," said a 10-year-old girl named Emma. "She always makes the clothes in the colors we like. And she lets us pick the buttons," added an 8-year-old boy. "My shirt has little car buttons." Jennifer learned that Susan didn't just donate ready-made clothes, but also visited the shelter regularly to take the children's measurements and learn their color and style preferences. "She treats every child as if they're special," Deborah said. "And for these children who often feel abandoned or rejected, that makes all the difference." "How did she start doing this?" Deborah hesitated before answering. "That's a story she should tell, but I can say it wasn't by chance that she ended up here." Jennifer understood there were aspects of Susan's life she still didn't know, but respected her privacy. When she returned to the store, Jennifer was determined to do something to help. She talked to Karen about the possibility of the store making regular donations to the shelter. "What kind of donations?" Karen asked. "Clothes that don't sell, leftover fabric, even money now and then." "Jennifer, we can't just start donating store inventory. It affects profits. But we can set aside clothes that were really headed for the trash. Instead of throwing them out, we donate them." Karen agreed that made sense. After all, discarded clothes didn't generate profit anyway. "What if we organized a campaign?" Amanda suggested. "Asking customers for donations?" "No," Jennifer said quickly. "Mrs. Johnson made it clear she doesn't want any publicity about the shelter. So how do we help? By doing things discreetly, no fanfare, no advertising." They decided to start small. Every week they would set aside the discarded clothes and take them to the shelter without mentioning they knew Susan. The following week, when Susan showed up at the shop, she noticed the change immediately. A small pile of damaged clothes was separated on a table in the back, and the prices were significantly lower. "What's this?" she asked Jennifer. "Clothes with defects we were going to throw out. We thought you might be interested." Susan examined the pieces carefully. Some had small tears, others stains, and a few had manufacturing flaws, nothing that couldn't be fixed or repurposed. "How much do you want for all of this?" $30, Jennifer replied. Susan looked at her in surprise. Previously, that amount of clothing would have cost at least $100. "Just that?" "They were going in the trash anyway. We just want to cover the cost of transport." Susan knew there was something behind this sudden change in behavior, but she decided not to question it. Maybe it was better to accept the quiet help than to overanalyze their motives. "All right," she said, reaching for her wallet. "Mrs. Johnson," Karen said, stepping closer. "We also set aside some fabric scraps left over from other orders. If you're interested." Susan looked at the fabrics. They were small pieces, but of good quality, perfect for details and finishes. "They're free," Karen added. "We were just going to throw them out anyway." "Why are you doing this?" The 3 employees exchanged glances. Jennifer decided to be honest. "Because we want to make up for how we treated you before." "I already said I don't want pity favors." "It's not pity," Karen said. "It's respect. We understand your work is important, and we want to support that." "Without wanting anything in return?" "Without wanting anything in return." Susan was silent for a moment, weighing their sincerity. "Fine," she finally said, "but on one condition." "What?" "If you really want to help, act like you don't know me. Don't treat me differently from other customers. Don't set aside special things for me. Don't do favors." "But how are we supposed to help then?" "By being professional, charging fair prices, treating all customers with respect, doing your jobs as well as you can." It was a subtle but powerful lesson. Susan was teaching them that the best way to make up for a mistake wasn't through grand gestures, but through consistent changes in behavior. Weeks passed, and the relationship between Susan and the shop employees settled into a new dynamic. There were no more mocking laughs or belittling comments, but there was also no special treatment or exaggerated favors. It was simply a respectful business relationship. Jennifer, however, couldn't shake her curiosity about Susan's personal story. She had noticed the seamstress always worked alone, never mentioned family or friends, and seemed to dedicate her entire life to the shelter project. One day, during a casual conversation, Jennifer decided to ask discreetly, "Mrs. Johnson, have you always lived in New York City?" Always. And family? Do you have children? Susan's expression changed instantly. She grew serious and took a small step back. Why do you want to know? Sorry, just curiosity. You don't have to answer. I don't have family, Susan said curtly. Just me. But Jennifer sensed there was more to that answer. A deep sadness, a weight that Susan carried and that perhaps explained her dedication to the children at the shelter. As they left the store, Jennifer decided to follow Susan again, but this time for a different reason. She didn't want to spy on her or uncover secrets. She simply wanted to understand better the woman who had made such an impact on her life. Susan didn't go straight home. Instead, she stopped at a flower shop and bought a small bouquet of white flowers. Then, she took the subway toward an area Jennifer didn't know. The trip lasted nearly an hour. When they got off the subway, Susan walked a few blocks until she reached a cemetery. Jennifer hesitated to follow her, but curiosity won out. Susan walked among the graves until she stopped in front of a simple tomb. She knelt and placed the flowers in the small vase there. Jennifer couldn't read the name on the headstone from where she stood, but she could see Susan speaking softly, as if talking to someone. The scene lasted about 15 minutes. When Susan stood up to leave, Jennifer saw tears on her face. It was the first time she had seen that strong woman show such vulnerability. Jennifer let Susan leave and discreetly approached the grave. When she could finally read the inscription on the headstone, her heart nearly stopped. Lily Grace Johnson, 2015-2022, beloved daughter. A child. Susan had lost a daughter at just 7 years old. Everything made sense now. Her dedication to the shelter children, her obsession with creating beautiful clothes for them, her solitary life. Susan was channeling her unfulfilled maternal love into a project that helped other children. Jennifer returned home deeply moved. She finally understood the true motivation behind Susan's work, and it made everything even more touching. The next day, she couldn't resist sharing her discovery with Karen and Amanda. "You won't believe what I found out about Mrs. Johnson," she said during their break. "What?" "She lost a little daughter. I saw the grave." The three of them fell silent, processing the information. "That's why she does all this for the shelter children," said Amanda. "Imagine that woman's pain," Karen remarked. "Losing a child must be the worst thing in the world." "And we used to laugh at her," Jennifer added, her voice trembling. "Jennifer," Karen said firmly, "Mrs. Johnson can't know you found this out." "Why?" "Because it's too personal. If she wanted us to know, she would have told us. But now that we know, we'll respect her even more. But without letting on that we know. She doesn't deserve to have her privacy invaded." Jennifer agreed, but carrying that secret was harder than she'd imagined. Every time she saw Susan, she thought of the daughter she'd lost and the love she poured into the shelter children. A few weeks later, Susan came into the store looking different. She seemed more tired, more worn down than usual. "Are you okay, Mrs. Johnson?" Jennifer asked, unable to hold back. "Just a little tired," she replied. "Would you like to sit for a bit? We can bring you some coffee." "No need. I just came to pick up a few pieces, then I'll go." But Jennifer noticed Susan was trembling slightly and had deep, dark circles under her eyes. She seemed to be going through some kind of crisis. "Mrs. Johnson, are you sure you're all right?" Susan stopped sorting through the clothes and looked at Jennifer with watery eyes. "Today marks 3 years," she said quietly. Jennifer understood immediately. It was the anniversary of her daughter's death. "I'm so sorry," she said, not thinking about the consequences of revealing she knew. Susan looked at her in surprise. "How did you—" Jennifer realized she'd made a mistake. Now she would have to explain how she knew about Susan's daughter. I saw when you went to the cemetery," she confessed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. You followed me there. I'm sorry. I just wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you do all this for the children. And now I know." Susan fell silent for a few moments. Jennifer feared she had ruined their relationship for good. "Lily Grace," Susan finally said. Her name was Lily Grace. She was beautiful. Jennifer replied, remembering the photo she had seen on the grave. She was the most important thing in my life, and now she's gone. What happened? Susan hesitated before answering. She was coming home from school, an accident. The driver was drunk. Jennifer felt her eyes fill with tears. It was such an unfair, devastating tragedy. After she passed, I couldn't go on living, Susan continued. I lost my job. I lost the will to do anything. Until one day, I walked past the shelter and saw the children playing in the yard. And then I thought, Lily Grace would want these children to be happy. She always cared about those who had less than her. That's why you started making the clothes. At first, it was just to keep my mind busy. But then I saw how happy the children were with pretty clothes, and I thought maybe it was a way to honor my daughter's memory. Karen and Amanda, who had overheard part of the conversation, quietly approached. Mrs. Johnson, Karen said softly, we didn't know. If we had, you'd pity me like you are now. It's not pity, it's admiration, Jennifer said. You turned your pain into love for other children. That's incredible. Lily Grace would be proud of you, Amanda added. Susan finally allowed herself to cry in front of the three women. It was the first time in 3 years she had shared her grief with anyone. Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough, she sobbed, that I should do more, help more children. You're doing so much, Jennifer said, hugging Susan, far more than most people would. And we want to help, Karen said, truly this time. Not out of guilt or pity, but because we believe in what you're doing. How do you want to help? However you'd like, with clothes, with supplies, with money, with work, whatever you need. Susan looked at the three women who, just weeks earlier, had treated her with disdain. Now they were offering genuine help and emotional support. Are you sure? Absolutely, they replied in unison. Then come with me today. I want you to meet the children. The trip to the shelter was unlike any other. For the first time, Susan wasn't alone. She had company, support, people who understood and respected her work. When they arrived, Deborah was surprised to see Susan with company. Mrs. Johnson, what a surprise, and who are your friends? They're the girls from the store where I buy the clothes. They want to learn about your work. The children greeted the visitors with curiosity and warmth. They showed off their clothes made by Susan, shared stories about how special they felt wearing new outfits, and talked about their dreams for the future. Aunt Susan, little Emma said, are these ladies going to make clothes for us too? They'll help in other ways, Susan replied, by bringing supplies, fabrics, things I need to make the clothes even prettier. That's so cool, the children exclaimed. Jennifer, Karen, and Amanda were deeply moved by what they saw. The children were joyful, affectionate, and visibly happy with the clothes Susan had made for them. Now we understand why you do this, said Karen to Susan. These children are special. All children are special, Susan replied. They just need someone to believe in them. Like Lily Grace was special, added Jennifer. Like Lily Grace was special, Susan agreed, smiling for the first time on that difficult day. When they left the shelter, the four women shared a common mission. They would work together to make a difference in those children's lives. In the following months, the store quietly transformed into a support center for Susan's project. The employees began setting aside not only damaged clothes, but also useful materials like buttons, zippers, ribbons, and fabrics. Karen, using her business connections, secured suppliers who donated sewing materials at special prices. Amanda organized a system to catalog and store the donated supplies. Jennifer learned basic sewing techniques to help Susan on busier days. The effort grew organically. Others in the community began noticing the change in the store and became interested in helping too. Customers started donating used clothes that could be refurbished, and some even offered money to buy new materials. Susan, who had worked alone for 3 years in her grief and determination, now found herself at the center of a small support network that shared her vision. Lily Grace would be surprised to see so many people helping, she told Jennifer one day as they worked together in her room. She'd be proud of the mother she had, Jennifer replied. Sometimes I talk to her, you know. I tell her about the children, about the clothes I'm making, and I feel like she approves. I'm sure she does. The project continued to grow. The shelter where Susan worked began receiving requests from other shelters in the area who had heard about the quality work being done there. "Mrs. Johnson," Deborah said one day, "3 shelters are asking if we can make clothes for their children too." "That's so many children," Susan responded. "I can't do it alone." "But you're not alone. You have the girls from the store, other volunteers." "That's true, maybe we can try." The expansion brought new challenges but also new rewards. Susan began organizing sewing workshops at the store on weekends where volunteers learned basic techniques to assist with production. Jennifer discovered a talent for sewing and became Susan's main assistant. Karen used her administrative skills to manage materials and distribution logistics. Amanda specialized in finding new supporters and donors. "Look at what we've managed to do," Karen said one Saturday, watching the store full of volunteers working at their sewing machines. "Not we," Susan corrected. "Lily Grace. She's the one who started all this." "How so?" "If she hadn't existed, if I hadn't gone through the pain of losing her, none of this would be happening. These children wouldn't have beautiful clothes, you wouldn't be here, this community wouldn't have formed." It was a different way of seeing tragedy, not as purely negative, but as something that had brought unexpected positive consequences. "So, Lily Grace is helping the children through you," Jennifer said. "Through all of us," Susan corrected. "She planted the seed, but you helped the tree grow." The first year of collaboration between Susan and the store employees resulted in over 200 clothing items donated to 5 different shelters. Each piece was unique, made with care and attention to detail. The children who received them weren't just numbers or statistics. They were familiar faces, unique personalities, individual dreams. Susan knew each one by name and remembered their color and style preferences. "Aunt Susan," said a 9-year-old boy named Ethan, "when I grow up, I want to make pretty clothes for kids too." "That's beautiful, Ethan." "And you will," she replied. "Can you teach me?" "Of course I can." These moments made all the work worthwhile. Seeing a child feel valued, special, worthy of receiving something beautiful and new was more rewarding than any outside recognition. On the 2nd anniversary of the partnership with the store, Susan made an unexpected proposal. "I want to tell Lily Grace's story to the children," she said to Jennifer. "Are you sure?" "Yes, they deserve to know why I do this, and maybe my story will help some of them who've also experienced loss." "That's a brave decision. Lily Grace taught me to be brave." The conversation took place on a Sunday afternoon when all the children from the 5 shelters gathered for a special celebration. Susan told her story with simplicity and honesty, speaking about the love she had for her daughter and how that love had transformed into care for other children. "Lily Grace was about your age," she said, "and she always told me she wanted to help kids who weren't as lucky as her." The children listened quietly, some relating to the pain of loss, others simply absorbing the lesson about turning sadness into love. "So, when you wear the clothes I make," Susan continued, "remember that every stitch was made with love, thinking about how you deserve to feel special and cherished." "We already knew you loved us," said Emma. "We could feel it in the clothes." It was a profound observation for a 10-year-old, but absolutely true. Love was the secret ingredient that made Susan's clothes special. "And now all these aunts here love you too," Susan said, pointing to Jennifer, Karen, Amanda, and the other volunteers. "You have a big family looking out for you." The celebration ended with tears of joy and warm hugs. The children understood they weren't just recipients of charity, but part of a story of love and resilience. In the months that followed, the project grew in ways Susan had never imagined. Local journalists heard the story and wanted to cover it, but she declined all interviews. "I don't want to become a news story," she explained to Jennifer. "This isn't about me, it's about the children." But a feature could bring more support, more donations. It could also bring people who just want to feel good about charity for 5 minutes. I'd rather keep things as they are. The decision to stay low profile was respected by everyone involved. The project grew organically, based on personal recommendations and word of mouth from those who witnessed the work firsthand. Some local businesses began donating materials regularly, A fabric factory started delivering its high-quality scraps instead of discarding them. A notion store offered special discounts for bulk purchases. "It's getting too big," remarked Margaret, Susan's neighbor, watching the steady flow of volunteers in and out of the apartment. "It's growing to the size it needs to be," Susan replied. "Don't you think Lily Grace would already be proud that you've done enough?" Susan paused her sewing and looked at Margaret. "Margaret, do you have children?" "I have two." "And did you stop loving them when they grew up?" "Of course not." "Then why would I stop loving Lily Grace? And if I still love her, why would I stop doing things that would make her happy?" Margaret understood then. This wasn't just a charity project. It was Susan Johnson's way of keeping her connection with her daughter alive, of continuing to be a mother even after the loss. "You're right," she said. "I'm sorry for asking." "No need to apologize, it's a natural question. But love doesn't have an expiration date." This conversation was overheard by Jennifer, who had arrived to drop off some materials. Susan's words moved her deeply and made her reflect on her own family relationships. That night, Jennifer called her mother, whom she hadn't spoken to in months because of a silly argument. "Mom, I want to apologize," she said over the phone. "Apologize for what, honey?" "For fighting with you, for not calling for so long. I learned from a friend that love doesn't have an expiration date." The reconciliation between Jennifer and her mother was just one of the many personal transformations Susan's project brought about in those involved. Karen became more patient with difficult clients, remembering that everyone faces invisible struggles. Amanda volunteered to teach literacy classes at another social project. Even Margaret, initially skeptical, started helping by organizing donated materials. "Lily Grace must be happy seeing all this kindness," Jennifer remarked one day as they worked together. "I'm sure she is," Susan replied. "Sometimes I feel her presence when I'm sewing." "What do you mean?" "It's hard to explain, but when I make an especially beautiful dress or when a child gets really happy with something I made, I feel like she's there, smiling. It must be her, approving her mum's work. Or maybe it's just longing, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that I feel connected to her through this work." The project's third year brought its biggest challenge yet. One of the city shelter officials questioned the origin of the donations and demanded proof of documentation for all activities. "They want us to register as a formal organization," Deborah explained to Susan. "With an EIN, financial reports, all the bureaucracy. And if we don't? They could ban the donations. They say it's for the children's safety." Susan was devastated by the news. She had built the entire project on simplicity and personal connection with the children. The idea of turning it into a formal organization with reports and red tape went against everything she believed in. "Maybe it's time to stop," she told Jennifer. "Stop? Why?" "Because it wasn't supposed to be like this. It was meant to be simple, direct, heart to heart. But the children need the clothes, and you need this work." "I know, but if it becomes a bureaucratic machine, it'll lose its essence." Jennifer understood Susan's dilemma but couldn't accept it all ending because of administrative rules. "We'll find a way," she said. "We always do." "What way?" "I don't know yet, but Lily Grace wouldn't let us give up now." The mention of her daughter made Susan reflect. Lily Grace had always been a determined child, one who didn't give up easily when she wanted something. "You're right," Susan said. "Lily Grace would fight anything that stood in the way of helping other children. Then we'll fight too." The solution came from an unexpected place. One of the volunteers who had joined the project was a lawyer and offered to help with the legal aspects for free. "You don't have to become a huge NGO," he explained. "You can register as a simple social project with the minimum necessary paperwork, and that will satisfy the city. Yes, they just want to make sure you're legitimate and transparent." The formalization process took a few months, but was done in a way that preserved as much of the project's personal and direct nature as possible. "The Lily Grace Project," Susan read from the official document. "It looks beautiful." "Now it's official," said Jennifer. "Your daughter has a project named after her. She always wanted her name to mean something. The official registration brought unexpected benefits. Larger companies began showing interest in making donations, knowing there was proper documentation. Some suppliers offered even better discounts for a registered organization. But the most important thing was that the children kept receiving their special clothes, made with the same love and care as always. "Aunt Susan," asked Ethan, now 12, "is it true your project is named after your daughter?" "It's true." "So when I wear these clothes, is it like she's hugging me?" The question moved Susan deeply. Ethan had managed to express exactly what she felt when sewing each piece. "That's exactly it, Ethan, that's exactly it." Over the years, the Lily Grace project became a reference in the area, not for its size or the number of donations, but for the quality of the work and the emotional impact it had on the children it helped. Susan grew older alongside the project, but never lost her enthusiasm. Every new child who arrived at the shelters was an opportunity to make a difference, to honor Lily Grace's memory. "Sometimes I think about what Lily Grace would be like today," she said to Jennifer on one of the project's anniversaries. "She'd be 15. How do you think she'd be? Generous, smart, caring about others. She'd probably be here helping us sew. She is helping, in her own way." That's true, she's the inspiration behind all this. Lily Grace's legacy had spread far beyond what her mother could have imagined. The children who received their first beautiful clothes through the project grew up carrying the lesson that they deserved good things, that they were worthy of care and love. Some of those children, now adults, sought out Susan to personally thank her for the impact the project had on their lives. "Mrs. Johnson," said Emma, now 18 and studying education, "those clothes you made changed how I saw myself." "How so, sweetheart?" "Before I thought shelter kids only deserved hand-me-downs, used things, stuff nobody else wanted. But when you made new clothes just for me, I realized I had worth." "You always had worth, Emma. But I needed someone to show me. And you did, through those clothes made with so much love." Conversations like these reaffirmed for Susan that her work mattered. Lily Grace had helped transform not just wardrobes but self-esteem and life perspectives. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story. Were you surprised by the real reason behind Susan's shopping? Leave a comment below about which part moved you the most, and if you know someone who, like Susan, turns pain into love for others. Your opinion means a lot to us. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories that will touch your heart.